want to start with Iran, of course. About a month ago, in an interview with NBC, you said you weren't clear what the strategic objectives are in Iran. A month later, are you confident in the administration's strategy?
Well, I don't know what the strategy is. I can neither be confident nor concerned. I'm concerned with the fact that we don't have clarity around it. We need to understand exactly what Congress can do to help the president with something many Republicans want. I've told the president I'm glad he went into Iran. He's the first president to have the guts to do it over the last 47 years. But there has to be strategic objectives, tactics to match those objectives, a defined timeline, or at least a defined sequence of events so that we can get the support of the American people. It's not a particularly popular war right now. And maintain the support of Congress.
Almost 90 days in now, I don't have to tell you about the inflation rate increasing, gas prices obviously increasing. You saw what the president said last week. He said, I don't think about Americans' financial situation when pushing for a deal with Iran. I think that probably caught a lot of Americans off guard. Does that concern you?
Yeah, it does. But because as President of the United States, you should be thinking about the people struggling the most 24/7, right? You have to take into account global actions like this that can affect people today. You do it because it's a matter of good policy, but it's also good politics. When you're having an affordability problem right now and you have somebody that is a billionaire saying he doesn't worry about what people are dealing with that grew up in trailer parks like I did, that's not very wise.
Is Secretary Pete Hegseth the right person to be leading the Pentagon right now when it comes to Iran?
I don't think so. I think I gave Mr. Hegseth the benefit of the doubt last year, voted for his confirmation.
You were very skeptical on that.
I was, but I did my homework. I couldn't find any firsthand corroborating evidence to substantiate the claims against him. So I had to default to the unanimous vote coming out of Senate Armed Services. But over the course of a year, he has gotten rid of some of the great heroes of our time in the form of generals. He is now proposing that we downgrade the command that focuses on Europe from a 4-star to a 3-star command. That sends a horrible message to our European partners and allies, and some even speculate it's even worse than that. It's a way to force out a very great general who was at one time head of the 82nd Airborne down in our state.
Who should be leading the Pentagon instead? One name that's been floated is Dan Driscoll from North Carolina, who is Secretary of Army.
I'm not going to tell the president who to choose from. If he wants to ask me privately, I'll give him my advice. I'm just simply saying Pete Hegseth has demonstrated to me he doesn't have the competence to run a large, complex organization, and we always need a highly competent, highly focused, unselfish leader of the Department of Defense.
Despite your concerns, we are nearly 90 days. You've not voted for a war powers resolution yet that would give Congress more control in this war. There could be a potential vote on this tomorrow. Will you vote for the war powers?
No, I'm not, because they're messaging votes. I had an activist last week come up to me and say, will you vote on the War Powers Act? I said, no, because it's a messaging exercise. She said, what do you mean? I said, it'll take votes to get out of the Senate, votes to get out of the House, subject to a veto override. 60 votes out of the Senate, simple majority of the House, subject to a veto override, 290 votes in the House, 67 votes in the Senate. We know it's a messaging exercise. If we go about this in an adversarial position, we're going to make a point, we're not going to make a difference. What I would prefer to do is get in the room with the president, get in the room with people that understand the situation in Iran, and map out an authorization for the use of military force that will let us sustain this effort. But they have to be transparent and they have to be accountable to Congress. They've been neither over the course of this engagement in Iran.
Some would say, I mean, look, it might potentially pass in the House. Some would say you have to still send a message even if it gets vetoed by the president.
I don't buy it, because look, these have been largely supported by Democrats who have no interest in supporting
Senator Cassidy supported it yesterday.
Yeah, and we know the circumstances behind that, so spare me that one.
Let me just ask you this, though. Is there willingness, though, by the president to get in the same room and have that conversation?
I think we have to keep pressing on it. Look, at some point, the War Powers Resolution requires the president to give us an update in 60 days. They've lapsed. I've given them some leeway there, but I think there's an increasing number of Republicans that want to help the president. The problem that I have with people like Pete Hegseth is he wants to make this adversarial. they win, we lose, instead of being consultative and recognizing the majority of Republicans want to support and sustain what the president's doing. But you don't do it by sending an incompetent spokesperson for the Department of Defense that's not showing us the respect that he should in our oversight capacity. And that's all we're doing here.
Department of Justice this week made some news because it announced a new $1.8 billion fund to pay individuals who believe they were targeted politically. A lot to talk about on this, but the money comes from a settlement over a lawsuit the president brought against the IRS over the unauthorized disclosure of his tax return years ago. First of all, do you believe this is legal, what the president is trying to do, what the Department of Justice is trying to do?
I'm not going to be an attorney and judge its legality, but I think it's stupid on stilts.
Why?
Because it will invariably put us in a position where your taxpayer dollars and my taxpayer dollars could potentially compensate someone who assaulted a police officer, admitted their guilt, got convicted, got pardoned, and now we're going to pay them for that? That's absurd. The American people are going to reject this out of hand. No reasonable person. Look, I've stipulated that the president pardoned a lot of people on January 6th that he probably should have. The dummies that went into the Capitol after it was breached. They weren't in any altercations with law enforcement, but that front line had a lot of thugs that should still be in prison and be in prison as long as the law would allow, and they too are eligible for this payout. Your dollars, my dollar. That is the definition, as Thomas Jefferson, I think, once said, of tyranny. When you take money from me to give to a purpose that I vehemently disagree with, that's tyranny, and that's what that account is.
You've been very consistent over the past year, and we spoke about it more than a year ago, about what should happen with people who hurt police officers here on January 6th. The acting attorney general was asked about that this week in a hearing and wouldn't rule out the possibility that people who assaulted police officers would be eligible for compensation from the fund.
That sort of thought process is as objectionable and as insulting to me as the Democrats' initiative for all cops are bastards. The 13.12 mile walk, ACAB, going after police officers. What we're doing as Republicans now, the Democrats have been for years yelling defund the police and disrupting the police. Now we're looking no different than them. There's no moral difference between the Democrats on Act Blue raising money for all cops are bastards and actually rewarding someone for assaulting a police officer on one of the darkest days in Senate history.
You've said you would block any nominee for Attorney General if this came up. Would you block Todd Blanche?
I don't get into hypotheticals, but I don't think that people have to go too far to see that anybody who equivocates and supported the thugs that harmed police officers will never get my voting committee or on the floor.
Well, no, we'll avoid hypotheticals, but should he be the acting Attorney General right now?
The president can have anybody he wants in a role that's not subject to my confirmation. When they want my vote for confirmation, they better not have anything in their record suggesting that what happened on January 6th was anything but one of the darkest days in American history.
All right, we'll avoid getting into the weeds on this next one because it's tied with the budget, but it doesn't look like it's going to be tied with the budget. And it's this White House ballroom that the president is putting forward. I mean, just to the point here. Senate is considering the legislation that would fund the ballroom with taxpayer money for security additions at a price tag of $1 billion. What message does that send to Americans who also see inflation increasing and see the deficit not lowering maybe as some would like?
Well, I've said I think it's a horrible message. I mean, you got people that don't have a dining room. They're just trying to put food on the kitchen table. And now we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for a ballroom. Beyond what we thought was going to be paid for by private donations. It's a real problem. Look, if the administration made a mistake and it can't be built for $300 million or $400 million with the supposed dollars that are available in a nonprofit account, then admit you made a mistake and that it cost some amount of money more. The latest estimate is about $220 million to harden it up to today's modern standards. Just admit it. don't try to gloss over it. Don't try to finesse it. Don't try to Jedi mind trick and say there's nothing to see here sort of stuff. If they made a mistake, admit you made a mistake, we build on that. The American people are great at forgiving people for making mistakes. They're not very patient with people that try to gloss over them.
The president was very critical of the Federal Reserve chairman when cost overruns occurred at the new headquarters.
The similarities are not lost on me.
I want to ask you about the president who endorsed a number of opponents to your Republican colleagues, John Cornyn of Texas, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who we mentioned, who just lost this past weekend. How worried are you that the Republican Party will lose any chance of being a big tent party, where if you disagree with the president on anything, you're out?
Look, I'm more worried about the practical implications of how many Republicans are going to be in this tent next year. When you do the things that have been done with redistricting and you're spreading out Republican votes over districts in a potentially difficult environment, don't be surprised if we're not at risk of having consequences not unlike what made me Speaker of the House in 2010. So aside from what you're talking about and taking a good, solid fiscal conservative like Bill Cassidy, to a certain extent, I could see the emotion that Bill did vote to impeach the president. I did not because I didn't think the impeachment process was appropriate. But there was anger there. It was after January the 6th. But if you just keep on, if you got to be at 100% to get the support of this president and some of the people around him, then why waste your time, frankly? We all have disagreements. We all have different ways of looking at things, and we're at our best when we allow those disagreements. If we want to become a purist party, then we're going to be a small party. And that leaves a great opportunity for Democrats that I've been spending my entire career defeating.
Is Texas now in a really good decent chance that Democrats are going to win because of that endorsement?
I don't know. I think Paxson will probably still have a slight advantage, but hundreds of millions of dollars could be spent in that state as a result of this at the expense of other states that we need to defend.
Two last questions before I let you go. I want to ask you about gerrymandering because, I mean, boy, if it's a day, North Carolina has gone through a new congressional map, but we've seen so many developments over the past few months. Does this concern you, what you're seeing? And should Congress pass legislation that requires independent redistricting commissions in every state?
No, because that, again, I believe that we have a lot of people around here who call themselves true conservatives and federalists and states' rights people, and yet they want to shove an election bill down people's throat because it's righteous conservative policy. You're either defer to states' rights and federalism or you don't. And a lot of people who for their entire career said they were truly the constitutionalists, the states' righters, prove they're not. They are when it's convenient. Would I like to see states have independent redistricting commissions? Yeah, but let me share my experience with you. When I came into the legislature in 2007, I signed on to independent redistricting. Yeah. And the Democrats were against it. All the Republicans were for it. And then I become Speaker. You know what I signed on to? Independent redistricting. Weird thing happened. All the Democrats were for it, and now the Republicans were against it. So please, Democrats, spare me the righteous indignation if suddenly they think Republicans created this problem. This has been a problem that's going on forever, but the states have to fix it, not the federal government.
There's blame to go around on both sides. Why
not?
Yeah,
but that's my point. My point is I can speak from the clarity of the moral high ground. I've been for it in the minority. I've been for it in the majority. I'm for it to this day. What I'm not for is a federal overreach, again, for a righteous purpose. These are things, elections should be left to the states. Political factors can be considered, but I do believe what the administration has done, forcing redistricting on the states, is an overreach on their part.
Lastly, last question is, you have said when you retire from the Senate in January, you will not sign up as a lobbyist.
Yeah.
There's new legislation, bipartisan legislation, to ban former lawmakers from becoming lobbyists. It's not going to go anywhere, frankly.
No, it's a messaging vote. Probably the people that filed it don't even want it to pass.
Would you, as someone who's will no longer be in this body?
It's just the messaging. I get so sick of these things that people file that have no intention of moving, and most likely they don't even support.
You don't think it's necessarily, it's not needed?
Well,
there is a cooling off period 1 year for 2 years.
There is a cooling off period, and how can you perpetually, eliminate somebody from taking on some other line of work? I think it's silly. I think it's a messaging bill, but there's a lot of silliness and messaging going around. That's a bipartisan affliction up here in Washington.
Senator Thom Tillis, always good conversation. Come back.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.